and gentlemen, welcome to the Schmoes show. I cut my finger open last week, so instead of having intro music with just the guitar fucking around, I'm just playing Mountain of the Bird, because this is a good album and I'm very proud of it. Go Mountain of the Bird. That's my band. Woohoo.
And I'm Kyril, and I just had an idea for a good gimmick that I should have thought of about 15 minutes ago, where I said, and I'm Kyril, and then I played some generic guitar music because I knew you couldn't today, and I'm also a schmo.
That would have been fucking funny. Oh well. It's such is life.
Yep, next time. There's always next time.
How's your week, Kyril?
It's been wild. Personal stuff has been kind of slow. I don't know if I've mentioned it on the show, but I've got some life stuff happening in the area here that is happening next week. So it was pretty busy earlier in the month, and now that that's kind of in a holding pattern, things have slowed down a bit. I didn't mention this to you. We had various government visits at my place of work over the last 2 weeks as well that have ended now. Everything went fine. It's just the usual kind of stuff that happens when you work in pharmaceuticals. But that was just like general noise happening that's not happening anymore either. So it's slowed down a fair bit, but the world news space must have heard that and decided to step up to the plate instead, because I sure haven't been bored this week, I'll say that.
It's been a little bit of a wacky week, hasn't it?
It's been kind of crazy, yeah.
After we bitched about it last week.
Yeah. Served up a doozy for us. How's your week been? Pretty good.
Really, there's nothing I could say that wouldn't be like just boring to talk about, because insurance is a boring practice.
Yeah.
You know what I found?
What's
like, that? I don't see any shame in working in insurance. I just find shame if you let it just be the most boring thing ever. I think like you have to have like a really good amount of like self-humor in this job lately. Because quite frankly, it is the most boring shit if you do not have a sense of humor in that job.
I can see that.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
The big news of the week is, of course, the ongoing reveal of how grossly incompetent literally everyone in the current administration is, both legally, logistically, and in terms of national security.
You know,
I guess, yeah.
When you say grossly incompetent, you're using a lot of big words. I don't think they would use that word. You know what? They're the ones in charge, so I think you're just being overly critical, Kyril.
Yeah, it's just the law. Who cares about that, right?
Nobody cares about the law.
No, they clearly don't. So yeah, we are still figuring out, coming to terms with the reality that is the situation now known as Signalgate. And before we get into it, I wanted to comment on just how frustrated I think Nixon would be to find such poorly done evil be given a name befitting himself, you know? Because Watergate is, of course, the crux of where all of the blank gate stuff comes from.
The originator.
And, yeah. Nixon was a gigantic piece of shit, without question. But he owned it, you know? He wasn't weaselly as much as he was just a bastard. And he seemed to know that and lean into it. And to have such incompetence be given lineage back to his malfeasance feels like something that he would take offense to.
I like that. I like that a lot. Because, like, I agree with you. I think Nixon was very much an egomaniac.
Yeah.
And, like, the idea of all this, like, following in his footsteps and this, like, hooking up to his legacy. Oh, he is turning in hell right now.
Yeah, it's made me think about the entomology of the word, the hyphenated gate word, how it seemed like for a while it was reserved. I'd be curious, in fact, as to when was the first time that blank gate was referred to outside of Watergate, but it seems like for a while it was reserved for things that had an implicit amount of, like, malice attributed to them, right? Because Nixon didn't just break the law. He broke the law trying to find political dirt by breaking in, like, almost like through petty crime to a degree. It's explicitly criminal. And to have it be thrown around so casually now, it's fascinating to see how much it's slid.
Okay, can I just make one small little thing I would like to bring up as well?
Please.
Imagine how the poor Watergate complex feels right now.
Yeah.
No one ever thinks about them.
What's Watergate up to?
That's what I'm
curious.
looking up right now, yeah.
I was about to do that, yeah.
So, okay, another shout out. Luigi Moretti, the architect behind Watergate. Imagine how that motherfucker is feeling at this moment. Like, it's not a victimless crime you did, Nixon. And quite frankly, you deserve it. But think about the poor people you're dragging into this as well. Let's see here.
The Watergate Hotel is still open. 4.3 stars on Google. Oh, they're expensive. 5 stars.
Let's see here.
Fancy.
You type in Watergate Hotel, and you still get the scandal first before the actual hotel.
Yeah.
Would you stay at the Watergate?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's the kind of thing where it's like, I imagine, because the reason that Watergate was involved with it at all, right, is because it was already a hotspot for governments and political activity, people from out of state having to stay for special events, So it has physical location properties that are advantageous to that. And because of that, it's the kind of thing where I feel like there's probably some really fascinating people who just happen to be staying there, aside from the scandal.
Oh, yeah. I imagine if you want to play, like, fucking eavesdropper, you're going to have a lot of fun there. Let's see here. I'm trying to see if there's any fun joke reviews.
Oh, I'm sure there's some good ones.
Yeah. This place does not offer room service. Kick that man out of your room immediately. That wasn't a joke review. I came up with that one on the spot.
That's pretty good.
Thank you.
Who are some famous guests? And then it just lists the people who are arrested.
Wow. This is sad. There's not one single joke review here.
That's unfortunate. I imagine there's probably well, maybe they just very specifically troll through it to find him and get rid of him.
Yeah, I feel like they have to at that point. I'm surprised the Watergate Hotel never sued Nixon for causing damage to their reputation.
And that'd probably be pretty hard. Arguably, this may have been a boon for them, finding that they remained open until they started for renovations in 2007, which were finished in 2012. And they reopened shortly after that and have remained open pretty much since.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how different our culture would be if it wasn't the Watergate Hotel? If it was just like a fucking Marriott.
Well, one, that doesn't flow off the tongue as well.
No, we'd be having the Signalot scandal, which sucks.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean anything.
That does not even sound remotely good. How would Elon make jokes about Elongate? Do you remember when he made that Twitter joke?
I do.
It was like back when he was in more good graces. But then the article about him paying off the loan with a horse came out. And then he started shutting up real fast about that.
Yeah. Getting to the national security risks, though, Signalgate, as it's come to be known, is the ensuing scandal that has formed from an assorted who's who of the president's cabinet accidentally inviting Atlantic editor Jeffrey Goldberg into a Signal messaging group app, where they proceeded to then discuss an ongoing or a forthcoming military strike on what they were claiming to be Houthi military targets in Yemen. And this is very much still ongoing, and there has been so much that has happened with this that I'm going to say from the start, I'm going to miss parts of the things that happened this week because there's been so much. Early on in this week, on Monday, the initial scandal was just that Goldberg had been invited to this by accident at all, which was both very funny because it's fun to point and laugh at the incompetence of the current administration when they put it on such brazen display. Also, very concerning, the fact that high-ranking members of the U.S. government, individuals of note, actually, they did a nice little sound off for this. We had heads of the Treasury, the DOD, the Vice President, Secretaries of State, people working in national security and press relations. A real who's who of the cabinet. Basically everybody short of the president themselves was involved in this chat. And the real names to keep in mind for this are Michael Waltz, who is National Security Advisor, Pete Hegseth, head of the Department of Defense, Stephen Miller. What is his title even more, other than just being a gigantic slimy piece of shit?
Stephen Miller. We're currently looking at Stephen Miller Band.
Stephen Miller, United States Homeland Security Advisor. He's a real slime ball. Good name to keep in mind just as things unfold, because he is a piece of shit. And, of course, Vice President J.D. Vance. So, as of Monday, we had the initial report from Jeffrey Goldberg in The Atlantic, where he detailed the fact that he had been included in this chat. He included a very limited number of screenshots from that demonstrating that this had happened, and talked through his perspective as this unfolded before him, where when he was initially invited to this group chat, he assumed it was a joke, and did for a while, where he thought, okay, some people are fucking with me, pretending to be, Secretary of State, Vice President, Secretary of Defense, and joking about these, military activities in Yemen. And it wasn't until he was able to corroborate the military activities that were being discussed in the group chat, with on-the-ground reporting in Yemen showing the exact strikes happening at the exact times that they were talked about, that he realized definitively, this is real. These are the actual people involved with this, and they are discussing classified information in full view of myself on a third-party chat app, violating so many laws. At which point he left the chat, and I'm sure caused them all to shit themselves once they saw that notification pop up. beyond the embarrassing part of Goldberg being added to this at all, the initial concern that was brought up was the fact that they were using this Signal chatting app at all. It's kind of fascinating because in the US and Canada, we have still basically unlimited SMS access on our phones for texting and messaging. So the prevalence of third-party chatting apps as a means of communicating just never really picked up here. Whereas in other regions, the idea of this is something that's a lot easier for the average person to understand because they still have to a limit on the number of messages they can send in a month. So things like WhatsApp are much more prevalent and common use top to bottom amongst their phone ecosystems. So Signal is basically a text messaging alternative application where it uses internet connectivity to send messages rather than your phone's cell service. So, and to that end, it is not controlled in any way by the US government. It does bill itself as being encrypted, end-to-end encrypted, but it still has vulnerabilities that the government is very, very much aware of. To the extent that about a week prior to this chat being started, the, who would it have been? Not DOD, DOJ, I believe it would have been, sent out basically like an all-staff email to everybody within the government, just continuing to make sure that they are aware that the usage of these applications for discussing government information is not permitted. So the idea that these people could claim that they didn't know is bullshit. They literally sent out an all-hands email the week prior reminding everybody that this is still the case, that while Signal is considered one of the better encrypted of these apps out there, to the standards that the government requires, it is not nearly close enough to protect national security. From there, this sparked a series of congressional questionings and investigations that were started in the Senate. And we got some real grade A non-answers out of the people involved with this that were very funny to watch. And credit to the folks doing the questioning. They had some good comebacks to their non-answers, really pressuring them, and you can see in their body language compared to the way that they typically behave that these people were very uncomfortable, which was nice to see for once. They are not at ease. They are not happy to have to be in this situation, and they went and did the good service to us to immediately perjure themselves, as we saw. Notable answers that they gave as part of these Senate inquiries included specifically claiming that these chats did not include any classified information at all. And I don't remember the name of which of the senators it was, but they specifically asked whether it included information such as weapons systems and strike targets, which was denied in a roundabout way, which further raised the question of, if these communications don't have classified information in them, why won't you provide them for us, as we've subpoenaed them? And they did not have a good answer for that. So naturally, because they gave testimony, sworn testimony, claiming that there was no classified information in these communications, Goldberg had a follow-up ready in the oven. I guarantee it was already written ahead of time, and they were just waiting for them to inevitably lie about it. But given that they went ahead and said that there was no classified information, that gives Goldberg the green light to go ahead and publish not the entirety of the group chats, because he's not an idiot, and he understands that if he steps too far, he could find himself brought back into this, but enough that we now have a much clearer picture about what exactly was talked about in this group chat and how bad this situation actually is from just the sheer amount of incompetence on display. At a bare minimum, we know that these people lied in the first round of Senate inquiries. as an example, let me go ahead and skip through here. I have them pulled up because, of course I do. Why wouldn't I? Pete Hegseth went ahead and gave us, do they have a date for this? No, we don't have a date for it because Reddit to Goldberg, he did not include all of the messages because there is apparently even more information that is even more concerning in terms of its amount of classification that it likely has. But we had a good little itinerary given by Pete Hegseth titled in all caps Team Update that gives a literal minute by minute breakdown of how the attack is going to happen step by step between what time F-18s are going to be launching, what time F-18 strikes are going to be hitting, what time the second round of F-18s are going to be launching, what time the second round of drone strikes are going to be hitting, and then the second round of F-18 strikes, what time the offshore naval activity strikes are going to be happening, literally down to the minute. Like we have 1536, F-18 second strike starts, also first Sea-Baked Tomahawks launched. Extremely specific details that, if unsecured, as we now know these messages were, could cause American military to be put at great risk, right? Like, part of the reason that these strikes work is that they're unexpected. If the Houthis know that an F-18 is going to be hitting their location at 12:15, they have the capability to intercept that plane, or at least try to. We've seen enough from the activity in Ukraine that you do not need sophisticated weapons systems to get lucky or overwhelm a sophisticated military plane and take it down. There could be very real consequences of this information being handled so poorly. So from that, we of course had the second round of Senate inquiries where these people proceeded to openly lie about what happened here. And, you know, it's Sunday now. This all happened kind of Monday to Thursday. We don't know what the eventual outcomes of this are going to be. We have gotten statements from the Department of Justice that they are not planning to file charges over this, which is pretty flagrantly corrupt. The law is explicit on this. We have the Presidential Records Act, where all communications between pretty much anybody in the government have to be preserved. Even if they include classified information, they don't have to be released, but the people, us, have a right to know what our government is doing to a degree. There should be the possibility for somebody to request a Freedom of Information Act about these communications related to the U.S. military strike in Yemen attacking Houthi terrorists. And maybe that information gets redacted to hell and it's not really useful for anything, but we have a right to know that that information exists, that these conversations are happening, that the chains of command are existing and being followed. And we'll get to it in a little bit, but there is some question about that is being raised. And particularly when it's related to attacks like this one that have resulted in, so far, at least, let me double check it, but when I last heard, at least 63 civilians were killed in this because the target that they were going after was in an apartment building that they just blew up. There's consequences from this kind of stuff, and they're very clearly trying to avoid those by acting outside the law.
Yeah. So here's my question for you.
Yes.
I can say I've been following this not as far as you have been, and I want to applaud the research you're showing me. My question is, commentary-wise, right? Because I like to think I'm the color commentator and all this.
Sure.
Do you have an opinion on what they were hoping to gain out of having a separate branch of government correspondence through Signal of all things?
So the obvious part of this, and one of the sort of features that Signal has, is the ability to self-delete messages after a fixed period of time. And one of the things that shows up at the very start of this group chat after Jeffrey Goldberg was added to it indicates what that policy for this group chat is. Disappearing message time set to 1 week. So today, these records of these messages no longer exist. And that is very explicit in that the purpose of their using Signal was to have communications in a medium that would not be preserved, so that they can talk about these things and not have to worry about the consequences later. An explicit violation of the Presidential Records Act. And in compliance with the Presidential Records Act, this is the thing, right? If they were concerned and claiming that they were trying to use it because of the encryption features or some other bullshit like that, the United States government has set up what they call SCIFs, sensitive compartmented information facilities, that are buildings facilities specifically designed for heads of state to have meetings and communications talking about extremely sensitive information, where it can be recorded, handled, and preserved in compliance with classified documentation standards. The really pathetic other side of this, though, and one of the reasons why I would suspect they started to use these chats, is unfortunately laziness. They don't want to go to a facility to have these communications. While it is, the disappearing messages thing clearly indicates that they're trying to avoid having these records preserved, and there's some amount of mental state, right? Mens rea is the law term. They are actively thinking about, we don't want these messages to exist in a week. I think the reason that they're using Signal at all is just laziness. They don't want to meet in person or get everybody together on a call. They want to send a text message like you would in a Discord and just have it happen without having to wait and get everybody together. And that in and of itself is another really pathetic indicator of the mental state of these people and the lack of reverence they have for the authority that they have, right?
Yeah.
They don't care about following the law, or they don't care about not following the law because they think it's going to come back and bite them in some way. They don't want to follow the law because it's personally inconvenient for their timetable.
So I've got to play devil's advocate here, and I know you.
Sure.
I'm going to say this in a very softball way because I know the answer to this.
Right.
How is this any different from the Hillary email server?
Right. So that is a very fair question, right? And one of the main differences and the crux of the Hillary email server was that while there were documents that were on Hillary's server that were marked as classified, as far as I'm aware, the way that those documents were handled by the people who were sending those to Hillary were failing to indicate their classification status in like the email header. So they went and they had their automated thing set up where things that were clearly marked as classified were caught up and not stored on that server, but certain things either managed to get through that filter by not being properly marked as such on the headers of the emails, so they weren't flagged correctly, or there was information that was on the server and then at a later point was classified. So it was not classified when it was stored there, and that resulted in it eventually being mishandled, allegedly, in that way. It's worth noting that charges were never successfully filed against Clinton because of those reasons. They were never able to clearly demonstrate that the Clintons were aware that they were harboring classified information, and they weren't able to demonstrate that once they were aware, they failed to remove that information from that setting and store it in another way. Another really good example of this that the Republican spin tried to do with Biden in the wake of the Trump classified documents bullshit in Mar-a-Lago was that there was a brief story about Biden having a small amount of classified documentation at one of his properties, one of his houses, that the National Records, I don't remember the exact title, but the National Records keepers basically had to send people out to do a sweep to make sure that they got everything and that it wasn't left there after his term had ended. And that demonstrates the correct chain of what's supposed to happen once you realize that you have classified information in your possession. You realize you have classified information. At the point that you realize it, you inform somebody else so that they are aware that classified information has been mishandled in some way, and then that classified information is secured so that it can't get out into the open. And that mental component is a really important piece of this, because these people are handling tons of classified information all the time, day in and day out. Mistakes happen. Things get misplaced. You have a pile of folders. You don't know what all of those exactly contain, and something's going to get missed. The problem with this group chat is that the classified information is the kind of stuff that there is no question about whether or not it is classified. They're talking about classified secret military activities, information that if it was not properly secured, and because these messages exist in the open now, we know it wasn't properly secured, will result in American service members being harmed, if not killed. That is where the big difference comes in here. Every other past incident of this has been a situation where classified information existed in an inappropriate format, but it was not, the people who held it were not aware at that time that it was inappropriate. Here, there is no room for them to be unaware of whether or not this information is classified, because they are actively sharing it between one another in an unsecured format.
And now for the real humdinger. Bro, what's going to happen to these people who are...
Yeah.
Very
likely nothing.
Yeah.
The Department of Justice has already released a statement because who is the head of the DOJ? Let me double check this. I cannot remember her name. Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi is the head of the Department of Justice. Like all these people, she's a sycophant. So it's no surprise that she's towing the line that the president has requested on this, and that there will be, at least as far as we know so far, they aren't pursuing charges related to this. So in terms of legal repercussions, we're going to have to wait at least 4 years before that comes around, if it even does. I'm honestly a little bit surprised that they aren't being more proactive in that regard to go through this, because Trump has already made it really clear that he doesn't give a shit about giving out pardons like candy.
Yeah.
Like, these people explicitly broke the law. Why don't you just give a pardon to them and be like, yeah, we know they did this, but it was an accident, so we don't want them to be, have unfair action taken against them at the next administration or whatever. I find that part a little bit surprising, just that they're not being more proactive, but, they're idiots, so they probably haven't thought that far ahead. So, legally, probably nothing. Congressionally, it has been very clear that there's a non-zero number of Republicans that are pissed off about this. It looks bad on them. These people... Well, yeah. But it also, it reflects poorly on them.
Yeah.
This is incompetence in a way that's very easy to understand, right? We talked about Watergate. That's the similar kind of thing. Nixon paid people to break into a hotel to steal information to find dirt on his political adversaries. It's pretty black and white. Similarly, in this case, you have public officials who are breaking the law by discussing classified information in unsecured channels. It's the kind of concept that isn't difficult for the average person to wrap their head around, you know? Whether or not they think that that is a bad thing remains to be seen, but it's enough that people are asking questions of their senators and their House of Representatives members about this. And the consequence that can come from there is that they could be impeached. And the ongoing Senate inquiries certainly seem to be setting the groundwork for that. Multiple of these people explicitly perjured themselves multiple times already. That alone, just lying about this, would probably be enough to get an average person impeached in any other decade, right?
Yeah.
Layering on top of that, though, the explicit illegality of their actions as it relates to record retention and as it relates to discussion of classified materials in an unsecured manner, those are things that people in Congress are intimately familiar about because they have to deal with the bureaucracy that involves handling classified information, going to these SCIFs to talk about these kinds of things, preserving records of their own. So if nothing other than pettiness, I could see them being pissed about having to go through and jump through these hoops that these people are trying to shirk. So we will have to wait and see to a degree as to what exactly happens. But while they're not going to go to jail, and they absolutely should, because they have sent people to jail for less, the chance of there being no consequences is not gone. And hopefully this will be a drum that the Democrats in the Senate have been waiting for to start beating on. And to that extent, this is going to be a real bellwether for Jeffries and Schumer to see whether or not, now that they've been, given in a basket, right, the perfect thing to start pushing back against the incompetence and illegality that the current administration has been perpetrating, whether or not they take this chance fully and start hammering against it. Because they're not going to get a better chance for a while, I don't think. They fucked up once. They're going to be looking out for themselves further now. They're not going to stop doing illegal things. They're just going to be looking for better ways to hide it.
Oh, no. I think it's more of a... How do I put this? I'm getting really cynical towards Schumer lately, especially after that little incident he pulled
absolutely.
last week. I've been calling Chuck Schumer the next Mitch McConnell, because Mitch is almost out the door. Let's face that.
Yeah.
But, I don't expect Chucky to do much. Jeffries, maybe? With that being said, yeah.
I don't disagree. This is the kind of situation, though, where they just need to not get in the way of the people who are. Good point.
In my opinion on a lot of this, I think Donnie not pardoning them is more of a bargaining chip for later, just to kind of keep them extra under his thumb.
Yep, I can see that.
Yeah, because I think, what I find very interesting about Donnie, right? Donnie is very tick for tat, if you can get my drift. He'll help you if you help him. If you screw him, he'll screw you kind of deal.
Yeah, he very much wants to be that old school kind of mobster.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Donnie plays the game like a mobster.
Yeah.
And that can be good or bad. Yeah.
But he wants to be, and he acts like it. So that's a good point.
So in my opinion, you have JD. I don't know how much Donnie knew about the whole Signal Act, right? But if this
so we
is
do
know. What's that?
We do know that he knew nothing about it. To a kind of alarming degree, because he was asked on, I believe it was Tuesday, after the first story had come out, prior to the Senate investigation starting, about what was he aware of on it, and he said that he wasn't aware of anything about it. And you could tell, because it's Trump, right? He's not exactly hard to read. You could tell he was just like, I don't know about that. He was super casual. He just didn't know. It was not something that he was clued into, that he cared about, that he was worrying about. So I do believe him when he says that he didn't know shit about it, because I don't think he did.
In that case, I think he's probably a little pissed. I think he's very pissed. I think that Donnie is going to leverage that tick for tat. If we make it to the end of the 4 years, we might see some pardons going out just to kind of say thank you for playing my game with me.
Guaranteed. If we get to the end of the 4 years and they haven't somehow completely destroyed the processes of democracy, there's going to be some real doozies of pardons that are going to be going around. And unfortunately, Biden kind of laid the framework for that already when he pardoned his son and his other family members.
I agree. So, one, Pence would never. And I think Donnie's kind of missing Pence at this moment. And that he is going to, this is just a good 4 years of leverage at this point. And assuming, we ever see JD run for president, I think if he wants to run for president, he's going to be very friendly towards the one guy who can let that still happen after a while.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be the day? I'd love to see him try. He would fail so badly.
Dude, he wouldn't make it past the primaries.
Oh, God, no.
No,
I mean, look, I don't want. So I'm going to preface this by saying I think it is incredibly crass to focus on people's physical qualities and attributes when talking about whether they have the merit to be in a position of authority, right? It doesn't matter. That being said, it does matter to other people. And the fact that whether he actually wears eyeliner or not, it looks like he does. And his constituents, the people who he needs to vote for him, can see that. And the people he's going to be running against can hammer on that. And he's dead in the water, especially now that people have already started to meme the shit out of him just based on his physical appearance.
In my opinion, if we ever saw JD run, right? Say what you will about Republicans. They have a very strong image that they love to abide by.
Yep.
JD does not match that image at all.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It is fascinating, though, isn't it? How quickly the internet started to make fun of his physical appearance. I don't think we've ever seen that. Like we obviously had a little bit of that with, Trump and his tanner, right? And that's been kind of an ongoing thing for a while, but to the degree that people have...
Yeah.
No, to the point where it's not like, oh, Trump's an idiot and he looks dumb. It's just, look at how dumb JD Vance looks. Look at this meme I made about how dumb JD Vance look, and that's the punchline. Like, we didn't get memes based on Trump's personal appearance. It was usually just crass digs. And it is so different to see the internet already getting to that point with Vance because he has a baby face.
He does, though. Like,
he does.
You and I are younger than him, and we don't even have baby faces like that.
No. On that point, though, I did want to mention a piece from Jasmine Crockett this week while we're on the topic of physical appearances, because the right got all up in arms about it, the fuck your feelings crowd, where she called, is it Texas governor, I want to say? Let me double check this. I can't remember. Yes, Texas Governor Greg Abbott called him Governor Hot Wheels because he's in a wheelchair, of course.
Yeah.
And extremely crude. I don't know if that's necessarily productive, but I do find it to be very funny that she went there with it because, it's a good dig. It's effective. And you can tell that it got under their skin quite a lot because the right-wing sping started to immediately demonize her for saying that, saying how, crass it was to talk about his disability in such a way. Never mind the fact that the current government is actively removing rights from the disabled. And then to bring it right back, God, was it RFK Jr., I think, had a comment about the Maryland Pritzker is his name. Pritzker, yeah, governor of Illinois, saying that he looked like he ate the last governor. It's just like, you hypocritical fucks. They want it both ways all the time, and it's so pathetic and funny how thin their skin has gotten. Where Governor Hot Wheels is over the line, but calling the Illinois governor fat is totally fine.
Do you think that's how JD got like the position? He ate Pence? Because I haven't seen Pence in a while.
I mean, Pence has just been keeping his head down because why the fuck would he do anything else? He doesn't want to get death threats anymore. I'm sure he gets enough of them as it is.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, this is basically, the next 4 years at least, is going to be, for him, the equivalent of when an artist, like, releases an album, does a tour, and then they just fuck off for a couple of years because they need to break, right? He's in that period right now. He's been going for 8 years, and he wants to get off this ride.
You know, if I was, like, the only sane person during January 6th, I'd probably be in his same shoes. And that's quite a phrase to assign only sane person to fucking Mike Pence of all people.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, I think everybody's just a bunch of fucking bullies nowadays. Like, and that even goes outside the world of politics. The internet has made everybody a goddamn bully, and I'm in that as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
One piece that I wanted to end on here with the whole Signalgate thing, before we go on to some of the other stuff, is a good article that I was skimming through earlier from US News that is titled "Why the Signalgate Story Isn't Fading." That goes through a lot of the developments that have happened since then, but in particular, the really dumb responses that they've had to it. The main one being that in the first Atlantic article, they use the word war plans. And then in the second one, they didn't change it. They described them in the second one as attack plans. And that they're latching onto that. These people who broke multiple laws are latching onto that as some sign that they actually shouldn't be getting bullied by the Senate and brought into these inquiries. And there is a distinction there, but it is not one that matters in this case. And it's really pathetic and telling that they are latching onto it so strongly.
I want to present one thing for you as well. Did you know Pence's bunny has a fucking Wikipedia page?
I did.
This is bizarre, and I kind of love it. And in a weird way, oddly humanizes Pence.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it does to a degree. And that is one of the things that I think is really worth remembering with both of Trump's administrations, is that they are, as far as I can recall, when I last heard this, the only administrations that did not have pets in the White House. Trump doesn't have pets. Like,
what the fuck?
The dude is that kind of a psycho. Yeah, right. Well, he's the president, remember?
Oh, you're right. Okay, then what's JD?
He did pay for it after all. Yeah, that's a good question. He's not allowed in the White House.
Do you think JD sleeps on like the foot of Trump's bed? You know, like obviously Melania's not there, so like it's just like this company Trump has, and like the cold nights alone at the White House.
Mm-hmm. I can see it.
Yeah, it's so weird that Trump doesn't have pets.
Going from here, because a lot of this, in my mind, sort of is just the next symptom in a long line of the ongoing decisions that the Trump administration is making as they don't so much slide into fascism, but sprint into it with open arms, right? And there's a couple of things that happened this week that are worth talking about to that end, that the kind of things that any other week would deserve to be full stories in and of themselves, but that end up being relegated to footnotes because there has been so much going on. First, I want to talk about the Tufts student, Rumesa Ozturk, who was abducted by ICE and is currently being imprisoned somewhere in Louisiana.
Dude,
This is
that
another
story's scary.
in these, and it is incredibly scary. This one, we have gotten video of the abduction right away, and it is not good. Ozturk is a Turkish citizen who is in the U.S. on an F1 student visa, currently undergoing, or was in a PhD program at Tufts University. And she was, I don't know how else to describe it other than kidnapped, because that's what they did. These people don't have warrants. They don't have identification on them. They just pull up, grab the person, shove them in a car, and leave. And it is extremely concerning because the only reason that they're doing this is because of their speech. In Ozturk's case, they signed on to an op-ed that was written to Tufts University, asking them to financially separate themselves from the state of Israel. That's it. No protests, no demonstrations, just a name on a document sent to their college making a request. About as explicit of free speech as there could be. And we're now getting into this part, and it has been a bit fascinating and wholly unsurprising to see just how quickly Marco Rubio has confirmed himself as the new Secretary of State to still be the gigantic piece of shit that we all have known him to be for years. Where he went on and gave statements to the press, basically saying that they have a list of about, I think he said like something like 300 student visas that they were canceling for completely bogus reasons that are explicitly in retaliation for these people exercising their First Amendment rights. And they've tried to spin it in bullshit ways, but it doesn't change the fact that these people were legal residents of the United States. Once they're in the United States, they are protected by the United States Constitution, and they are ignoring that in order to achieve their ideological goals of removing people who are vocally dissident to the current administration.
You expect those motherfuckers to read the Constitution?
I don't. But it's still important to call them out on it, you know?
I think it's kind of past the point of being called out. Like I said before, everybody's a fucking bully nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Like, and part of the reason I think it goes on is because there's not enough consequences for being a bully at this point. So I'm saying, like, I'm not promoting violence. I'm just saying there needs to be something, street justice, if you will.
Yeah, I think that is going to be the thing that we need to happen. And we have a good story later that I think helps to highlight that point about how we need to get offline.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
Get in these people's like actual faces, because they are way too comfortable in their online spaces to ever be realistically disrupted in a way that matters through there.
Dude, I will say, like, the 2024 election has taught me a lot about, like, how I built my own little fucking bubble. Because I was firmly believing Harris was going to win. It was a big slice of humble pie, which I think was really good for me in general. And, like, ever since then, I've been re-examining my whole relationship with the fucking internet. And I swear, it's not like leaving the Matrix kind of stupid, like where I'm pretending I'm so deep or whatnot. But I'm saying, like, once you kind of see that in yourself, you see it in other people real fast. Especially a lot of our alt-right shitheads.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So yeah, this is the latest in what seems to clearly be the administration's going after people for exercising their free speech. We are going to see more of this happening, and yeah, it's straight up Nazi shit. There's not really another way to put it. It's concerning, to say the very least, and
it's
hard to, like, you can go out and protest, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
I would encourage people to protest, and thankfully there are people who are in the area actively organized against this. But shit's scary.
It's really scary. Like, if you watch the video, it's terrifying.
Yeah. Anybody who is not a U.S. citizen, I wouldn't fault them for not wanting to risk themselves over this. We already have an incident of a Chinese student who was also vocal in their previous political thoughts, who has been named as a target of interest by the administration to be deported, and has so far thankfully evaded that.
Good on them.
How they're doing that, I don't know, but that was the story as I last heard it, and that is unfortunately seeming like it's going to be the reality for some period of time, where folks who are in these groups that are now at risk, are going to have to be extremely careful.
Yeah.
Second piece here, footnotes of fascism. Trump issued an executive order that, I don't know. It's explicitly unconstitutional. Preface it with that. But Trump has issued an executive order ordering states to make a variety of changes to the way that they conduct federal elections. And it's not good. Put it that way, right? It's the bare minimum of the way to say it, but multiple times now we have gotten confirmations from the courts that the states have the right to conduct their elections as they see fit, and that the federal government can pass laws that change or set requirements for how the states have to carry that out, like the voter registration, or the Voter Rights Act, for example.
Yeah.
But you can't, for example, change proof of citizenship requirements or require mail-in voting date requirements, as Trump is trying to do with these executive orders. With this executive order, to be clear, it is a single one that is extremely broad and overreaching. It's bad. Like, attacking voting is pretty explicitly anti-democratic, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah. The last piece that I want to bring up on these footnotes is that at the start of the week, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem went and did a fun photo op in El Salvador, where she stood in front of a mass prison that the El Salvador government runs, that is allegedly used to house dangerous criminals related to gang activity, and gave a fun little speech in front of them.
That's the one that shot a dog, right?
Yes, it is. I don't have much to say on this, other than the fact that it is extremely horrific imagery, right? Like, there's no two ways about it. It is inhumane fundamentally, and the running through line of the way that El Salvador has been treating their prisoners has overwhelmingly been that, like, the pro El Salvador position, right, is that yes, this is awful, but you don't understand how bad the gang stuff is, and it's necessary. Explicitly acknowledging that people are being deprived of their rights, but that it is justified because of the circumstances of the situation there. To have the US government not only courting that kind of behavior, but sending representatives down there to pose in front of it is really fucking bad. And it made me think back, as so much of this does, to World War II and how there was this sort of, there is, I guess, I think even still, this idea where people didn't realize how bad the situation was in the concentration camps until after reporting and news was on the ground in Germany and sending back footage, photo and video of what was actually happening at these places. How up until that point, people broadly understood that it was bad and something needed to happen, but that seeing the specifics of it amplified or justified the actions up to that point. And I can't help but think about how similar the imagery that we are seeing today is to that, and how unmoved so many people are about it. And from that, how we know that there were plenty of Nazi sympathizers in the United States during World War II.
Oh, yeah.
And how, I was going to say just real quick, how from that, we have this idea that people somehow changed their minds as a result of the footage that we had in the wake of World War II. But it seems pretty clear now that we live in the space where this is happening in real time. It's not a question as to what conditions people are being treated. It's pretty clear that people didn't change their minds. They just understood how unpopular their awful opinions were and hid it. Because that's what we're seeing now.
Can I give a very cynical analysis of how I think it happened? I think a lot of that, like, sympathy and empathy that came from changing people from sympathizing with Germany to no longer sympathizing with Germany comes purely from the footage of white Jewish people that was shown.
Mm-hmm.
I do think a lot of this is embedded in some very sick racism. And I think that a lot of the imagery people get when they justify these to their minds is embedded in race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. To cap all this off, Trump had a phone call this morning, an interview with NBC, where he was explicitly asked about whether or not he would be trying to seek a third term as president. I'm just going to read the quotes here. This is from Trump in a Sunday morning phone call with NB News. A lot of people want me to do it. I mean, I basically tell them we have a long way to go. You know, it's very early in the administration. I'm focused on the current. I like working. I'm not joking, but I'm not. It is far too early to think about it. And when asked whether he had been presented with plans to allow him to seek a third term, he replied, "There are methods with which you could do it."
Okay.
So there we go. That is the state of American fascism.
I don't know if he wants a third term.
Can he afford not to? They've broken so many laws already that at this point, if he doesn't, the only way he doesn't go to jail is by pardoning himself. And that is something that is completely untested legally.
I think that might be what he's debating between. Like, it's too early to talk about that. Because I think you and I both know, like, Donnie doesn't like being president. He likes the status, but he doesn't like the job.
Mm-hmm.
It gets into his golf time too much. Like, that man is living every retired man's fantasy when he's not president.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I truly think it's not above the table for him. And I'm sure he thinks of it as an option. And I think you're very right in your assessment that can he afford not to? I think he will look for other methods, and then the third term thing is going to come very late into the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Wrapping up this first piece of news, I want to talk about JD Vance's very bad, no good, awful time in Greenland, because
Please.
it's very funny to point and laugh at him. And I also want to send you this picture from, this is, to be clear, this is from the New York Times, right? Because there's been a lot of memes going around of JD Vance with his face being very round and smooth and all, because people are making fun of him and he has a very round face. So there's also been a lot of images going around purporting to be real that are fake, that have been edited, right? So sending this literally from the New York Times. This is an actual picture, and look at this very round boy.
I love him. He's like a little hamster.
It's a really good way of putting it. He is very hamster-like.
Okay, I can be very honest. It looks like he's not drinking enough water because his face is puffy as fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I'm sure JD is probably trying to trim his face down, and the beard ain't helping. Beard's not helping at all. Dude looks like he just needs water.
Mm-hmm. So, Vance and his wife went to Greenland and were basically told to kick rocks by the locals. They apparently tried to do a local Danish reporter said that the U.S. administration did a door-to-door survey of locals to see if they could find somebody who would visit with them to do a photo op, and they were told no by everyone. Literally no one on the island wanted to visit with the vice president and his wife.
Yeah.
Where was it?
You know what this reminds me of?
Yes, please.
This is the kind of shit like that would happen to Elon, where he's looking for someone to like him. And it comes like this like Curb Your Enthusiasm-esque skit where everybody just instantly rejects him upon seeing him.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. I had a quote here that I was digging up from Lars Trier Morgensen, political analyst in Copenhagen. Quote, "It's a tactical retreat. On the one hand, they de-escalated by not carrying out the full cultural mission and skipping the PR stunt. On the other hand, it's a symbolic escalation that the highest ranking official is visiting Greenland. It is apparently the most senior American official to ever visit Greenland. Ever. Finally, they capped off their week by having a sort of press conference slash speech at the military base that Vance was visiting at. Quote, "Our message to Denmark is very simple." This is from Vance. "You have not done a good job by the people of Greenland. You have underinvested in the people of Greenland, and you have underinvested in the security architecture of this incredible, beautiful landmass filled with incredible people."
Dear God.
Yeah.
The hubris.
Went on to say the president said we have to have Greenland, and I think we do have to be more serious about the security of Greenland. We respect the self-determination of the people, but my argument to them is I think you'd be a lot better coming under the United States security umbrella than you have been under Denmark's.
Why are they so obsessed?
They're very dumb. And Greenland, fundamentally, this is the same thing that the U.S. has done with oil in the Middle East, right? They want resources, and Greenland has resources that they want. And they want to make a pretense so that they can go and take those resources. Previously, because the Middle East is very far away and it's full of brown people that a lot of people in the U.S. hate, that argument has been very easy. You just make a war there claiming terrorism or whatever and take what you want in the aftermath. Or you establish governments more favorable to your own interests that will allow you to come in and take them. That's one of the main reasons why the U.S. gives a shit about Houthi rebels in Yemen at all, is because they're disrupting oil trade through the straits that are the Yemen coast shares. Greenland, though, doesn't have terrorists. They don't really have anything. And part of this is that they're very clearly trying to sow the seeds of what their arguments might be to try and get to that argument. In other things they were talking about during this visit, they specifically mentioned Greenland not having security from China and Russia, and that the Denmark has not been doing well enough in that specific regard. It's all very thinly veiled, but so far seems to be largely unsuccessful because the people of Denmark don't want this. The people of Greenland don't want this. They are an autonomous zone. They don't want to be subjugated by the United States, very clearly, and they've made that explicit.
To our Greenland audience, I apologize. Thank you for your service against the J.D. Vance menace.
Yeah. We also had, mentioned this very briefly before the show started, official White House, I believe their Twitter account, posted a picture of J.D. Vance in military cosplay, basically, with the caption, "Just the Vice President of the United States sending some freedom seeds downrange. Doesn't get more American than that." And Vance looks ridiculous. We talked about this, how this seems like a very intentional PR stunt to try and rehabilitate Vance's image in the wake of him being ridiculed immensely through memes, where people think he looks childish and they make him look even sillier by exaggerating his features. So we had this Greenland visit that was supposed to be him showing up and doing, the usual PR stuff that completely failed. And they tried this gun range photo shoot that just is extremely weird.
What is with the obsession? Like, I know the obsession. It's basic fascism 101. But there's like this weird hyper masculinity they're trying to push with Donnie Part 2. Mm-hmm. And like, obviously JD is not what I would count as like a very masculine man. Donnie is past his prime too much to kind of qualify for that too. Elon, let's face it, botched penis pump says enough for itself. So like, they what is up with them and trying to keep the charade going when they are not at all anywhere near that masculinity they keep trying to go for?
Right. So it is because it's their brand.
Yeah.
This is the imagery that they've been pushing for the better part of a decade now, and it is the imagery that a large amount of their voting constituents also share. Think back to, what is it? Was that Ferguson, where you had the couple standing outside their downtown home with the guy with his assault rifle and the wife with her revolver, who in the same way probably think they look like the most badass people in the world, and they just look like assholes trying to pretend to be someone else.
Dude, I don't know what to call it, because like, I want to call it like soy boy masculinity, but people on soy
Yeah.
look more trim and less inflated than half those people.
It fundamentally comes down to what I think, and a lot of people have speculated on, as like the reason why Trump is a public figure at all. The idea that he is the poor man's idea of a rich man. You have people like, Rogan, who is the weak man's idea of a strong man, or what the hell is his name? Jones. An idiot's idea of someone who's smart, right? People who have cultivated an identity around a lie about who they are to people who are ignorant about a field or a topic and take their word at it because they look like they're an idea rather than the reality. And it's the same reason why you have people like Musk who talk a bunch of shit and try to pick fights with people who are better than them, right? Like both literally and not. You had Musk try to get into a fist fight with Mark Zuckerberg and he pussied out because of course he did. He'd get his ass beat. Zuckerberg actually does martial arts. It would not be a contest, so he had to fake it and back out. And more recently, we had Musk try to bait the Daily Show, saying like, "Oh, we'd love to do an interview with them, but they'd have to promise not to edit their show." And the Daily Show is just like, "Yeah, we do that. That's how we do all of our shows. It's done live. It's not edited." And he immediately backed out of that as well. It's the long line in these kinds of chains where they look tough, they look smart, they look, wealthy, and whenever they get themselves into a position where they risk being challenged on that, they have to find a way to back out because they aren't actually.
Yeah. Good point. They can't nut up and shut up. They can't nut up, so they shut up half the time. Like, I don't know, man.
Yep. And they rely on the people who follow them to be incurious enough not to look past their lies. That's a really fundamental element of this, right? It's the reason why the anti-vaxxer things work as effectively as they do, is you have people who see correlation, who internalize that as belief, but don't look past that to see if their gut feeling is right. And then they find a person who says, actually, your gut feeling is right. And I'm saying you're right. And here's all this other stuff.
I think COVID is probably one of the best things that ever happened to this movement of people. Because quite frankly, it really took a lot of people who got a whole bunch of free time they shouldn't have, put them online where credibility is not so much given as much as it's a currency. Because let's face it, you can buy an online presence nowadays.
More or less.
Yeah. I'm convinced that COVID really changed a lot of really skewed a lot of what people think is acceptable nowadays.
Yeah.
And like you said, people need to go touch grass. Sorry.
I would specifically point to the lockdowns to that as well, where there is, I think this is something that hasn't really been reckoned with by the, policy arms, so to speak, of the Democratic Party, is the fact that for a lot of people who were more actual centrists, type of swing voters, the lockdowns were very unpopular, if only from the perspective of people not liking being told what to do. And because you had the lockdowns partnered with people having too much time, that then drew those people to the Alex Joneses and the Joe Rogans, the people who have built their brands and identities about being
contrarian, anti-authoritative.
I was gonna say supposedly controversial, even though they have millions of followers. They like to act like they're the little guys, even though they aren't. And from that has pushed them further and further down with other things, starting from that one thing that they agreed with, or that validated the beliefs that they already had, regardless of whether those beliefs were founded in anything.
That's a good word. Validation. I feel that's a lot of people right now. People are very fucking insecure with themselves, and they will go to any kind of thing in their little online bubble, their little environments that they make to validate themselves. It's like a little mini narcissist pool on the internet.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Last piece of news that I'd like us to go through today, because I found this to be extremely fascinating. Really good, both an article, opinion piece from Ed Ziltron from does a bunch of stuff, but he has a weekly newsletter called Where's Your Ed At? And I highly recommend going out and reading the full piece that he wrote on this. It is fairly long and fairly dense, though. So I guess it's a half-hour read kind of thing, and it's about finances and AI companies, and it gets into some of those weeds because it has to. But the article that he wrote is titled "CoreWeave is a Time Bomb." It's worth the read. If you would prefer not to do that, though, I actually have two alternatives where Ed Ziltron on his own YouTube channel, Better Offline, posted a monologue titled "We Need to Talk About CoreWeave," where he goes through that specific thing in some more details, as well as appearing as a guest on the Even More News podcast episode titled "They Have So Many Excuses for the Signal Chat Fiasco, and They're All Dumb," where at the end, he again talks about his article specifically related to CoreWeave. So this is the thing that I've been taking some notes on that I needed to have us start a little bit late from, because it's a lot. And I'm going to try and condense this down as much as I can. But I do really recommend going out and reading the full article, because I think this is really important and is going to be strongly indicative of the AI, crypto, NFT space that we've seen churn from one piece to the next piece to the next piece, that's all had this kind of tech bro grift vibe kind of surrounding it, right? We've been following this for years now as they've gone from one scam to the next, as they both skirt regulation, do outright grifts, and move on to the next thing as the last thing becomes wildly unprofitable. And in his article, Ed talks about an AI infrastructure company called CoreWeave. Fundamentally, they own the data centers with the GPUs that AI compute runs on. Their customers include places like Microsoft, right? People who own the AI tools, but don't necessarily have the physical hardware to run them on yet, right?
Okay, yeah.
Let me see if I can find the exact line here, but from Ed's article, it's a company that deals in the infrastructure aspect of AI, where one would naturally assume is where all the money really is, putting up the servers for hyperscalers to run their models. You know, we've seen companies like NVIDIA in particular see their stock price inflate massively in this bubble, where people want NVIDIA graphics cards in such a greater demand than NVIDIA can produce them, that you know, you have the newest ones going on the secondary market for 5 to 10 times their sticker value at times, you know, because there seems like there's this demand for them. What's unique about CoreWeave's situation, though, is their scale and the fact that they are trying to have an initial public offering on the New York Stock Exchange. To their scale, they are on par with what is known as these hyperscalers. Think companies like Google and Amazon and Meta, where they both have the physical facilities running their own hardware, and then also the product on the other side of that that is sold on to other people who want to use their software. all of the AI integration to Google products, for example. All of that is running on Google's hardware. But if you're not Google or Facebook or Amazon and you want to do these AI stuff, what do? You turn to a company like CoreWeave, who has the physical hardware and will then sell you access to that hardware for a fee in order to run your own software. This is where companies like Microsoft with OpenAI, which they recently bought, would run their stuff. OpenAI doesn't have their own server farms because they can't scale it to that amount. They're not profitable enough to do that, well, let alone profitable at all. So they turn to other companies to support the physical spaces that allow them to run their models. To that end, it's not unreasonable to have CoreWeave infrastructure-wise viewed as being on par with a company like Amazon or Google. They're not as big, but they are competitors still. They're like half the size of those, which, you know, is a difference in scale, but they're competing. They're in the ballpark, right? Even if they're not in a place that they can beat them. So this is a big company, fundamentally. That's the main thing that I'm trying to get across here, is that the size of this is very real and shouldn't be understated, because they're trying to do this initial public offering. And a part of that initial public offering requires them to file a ton of paperwork with the Securities and Exchange Commissions called an S-1 disclosure, where they basically have to go in and list all of their financials and all of the risks that they face potentially as a company in order to be listed on the stock market, so that prospective investors can understand the risk of buying into their stock and what that actually entails. If we look historically, we can find many examples of companies who publish their S-1 disclosures and then fail massively. A notable one being WeWork, a company that tried to capitalize on the work from home boom post-COVID, went in, had their S-1 disclosure, and didn't even end up having an IPO because they couldn't face the scrutiny that came about from having their financials put into the light. Other companies, like failed EV companies like Fisker, had similar situations where they wanted to do an IPO. Their financials were dragged out into the light. Everybody realized, but everybody kind of knew already, wow, these companies suck. And they never got past that stage. CoreWeave is finding themselves in a similar position. Ed goes into this in much, much greater detail, but the crux of CoreWeave's problems are financial. Last year, they had 2.4. Let me double check this number real quick. I want to say $2.4 billion in revenue, $1.9 billion in revenue in 2024 fiscal year. However, they still lost $860 million in that same year. So 1.9 billion in revenue, about 2.6 in expenses. And the main part of this is that because CoreWeave is so focused on infrastructure, they are constantly having to spend money to expand their facilities and to buy new graphics cards. And the graphics card part of this is particularly fascinating, and it ties into one of the major problems that they have with their debt situation, because of course they have tons of loans that they've been taking out to pay for this.
You know,
one of the ways.
Sorry.
Yes, please.
You know what I find kind of impressive?
Yeah.
The loan economy right now.
Yeah.
Sam's dad, right? He's a real big investor type. He's really fun to listen to. Very interesting guy. He was talking about how he was trying to get on the ground floor of a lot of like dispensary companies for marijuana because they don't have debt, because banks can't loan to them because the federal, FDIC won't let them.
Absolutely.
But you can come to Michigan, pure Michigan, always.
Pure Michigan
state. You can come to Michigan, right? And there's dispensaries all over the place, and they're doing very well without loans.
Oh, yeah.
And quite frankly, very healthy businesses, because demand's so high, obviously. But it's always so fun for me to look at these businesses doing fucking baller numbers, treating their employees well, ethically,
excellent benefits.
Excellent. And they don't need a fucking loan.
Nope.
And I argue they're pretty good for the economy here in Michigan as well.
Oh yeah, tons of tax dollars.
Yeah. And then you see these big companies having to sell stock to expand just to pay off their fucking loans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it gets worse than that for CoreWeave, though. That's the kind of arrangement that one would imagine. When you think of the kind of loans that someone gets that are this scale, they require collateral. Think to, and this is something that we're going to talk about next week because we're not going to have time for it, but when Elon Musk bought Twitter, the loans that he used to secure that money to buy Twitter were collateralized by his Tesla stock. In the case of CoreWeave, the collateral that they used for their loans was their graphics cards, their physical property that they had. However, graphics cards go out of date, especially when you're at the cutting edge like they're trying to be, very quickly, by the year. So in a lot of these loans that they collateralized with their graphics cards, even 2 or 3 years ago, the value of their graphics cards are already down by as much as 75% of what they were when they were new. And that's before getting into the reality that you have to sell those at some point, and people don't want them anymore because they're out of date. So because of that, they now have to pay interest on the collateral for these because the collateral is worth less. So they have the loan itself with the principal, they have the interest on that loan, and they have the additional interest on the collateral for that loan because the collateral is a depreciating asset. Ed makes the good point here, where this is extremely reminiscent of the housing crisis in 2008, where banks made collateralized debt obligations that depreciated in a similar way, where they wrapped up these loans in collateral that wasn't traditional, and it presented this new, extremely volatile risk that, in a way, resulted in the collapse of that market for a time at least. In a more numbers-to-numbers kind of way, though, the big problem that CoreWeave has is that they have taken on billions and billions of dollars in debt, primarily through two mechanisms that are called delayed draw term loans, where the idea is that rather than a kind of mortgage that one would imagine, where, say, you get a $200,000 mortgage, you get all that money up front, you pay for the thing, and then you start paying it back, principal and interest, from there on. A delayed draw term loan gives you part of that funding up front, and then pursuant on you meeting certain terms later, you get the rest of that loan later.
Okay.
CoreWeave has two big ones of these that are funded in half by Blackstone, of course, which is a major asset management firm, as well as Magnetar Capital, which is an Illinois-based hedge fund famous for their creation of the collateralized debt obligation. What do you know? The first of these loans is estimated to be worth about $2.3 billion, which at this point has been fully drawn. So CoreWeave has fully been given that $2.3 billion and is in the process of paying that back. Currently, Ed has estimated that they have to pay at least $829 million per year in interest payments on that through 2028, when it would have to be fully paid off. The interest rate on this loan, do you want to take a guess what the interest rate on this loan is? Because it's fucking wild. Home loans right now, the federal interest rate is at about 7%, a little bit under, in fact. So would you take a guess what their interest rate here is?
I want it on record that I do not like where any of this is going.
It's bad. Yeah.
32%.
Thankfully, it's not nearly that bad.
Okay.
It's still 14, which is really fucking bad for a situation like this, right? When you look at the kinds of interest rates that these companies would be getting on these loans, typically it's less than the federal interest rate because they're working out these private deals and they're at such a massive scale. So 14% is really bad, especially when it's on $2.3 billion.
Dude, my student loans were even that high.
Yeah, it's really bad. So that's the first problem, is that they have this $2.3 billion loan that they're expected to pay nearly $900 million per year through 2028 on. Their second one of these loans is valued at $7.6 billion, of which they've taken half of it so far, with them expecting to take the other half in June of this year. Currently, the interest rate on it is at a minimum of 10.53%, and they're going to have to spend $760 million per year in interest payments just on that. The caveat on this, though, is that this loan has a particular little extra nugget on it, where part of their agreement that allowed them to get it is that any future funding that they get has to first go to paying this loan off first.
Hell no.
Before anything else. They get first dibs, and they have to pay off this $7.6 billion loan first. So already, they're at the point where they have over $1.5 billion that they're going to have to be spending just in interest payments on their loans through at least 2028. And remember, last year, they only made $1.9 billion total. Part of the ways that they're trying to make this work is that they're very proudly penned an $11.9 billion deal with OpenAI that, starting in October, they'll be working with OpenAI to be a major partner. However, that agreement is going to require them to invest even more in their infrastructure. And if you remember, they have a $7.6 billion loan they have to pay off. If OpenAI gives them this $11 billion deal, any of that money is going to have to go off to paying this loan first before they can even start making that infrastructure. Meaning that it's likely they're going to have to take out even more money to get the infrastructure ready by October for this OpenAI deal, at which point they can start to make that money back. So October is the date where they start to make money back on this. Everywhere in between that, they're taking out even more and more money.
If only there was a way they can get a whole bunch of money, like from funding, in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This, by Ed's assessment, is resulting in a sort of like nuclear bomb that's going to be going off for CoreWeave sometime by October, because they already have massive amounts of debt that they're going to have to start paying off in October. They are going to need to take more debt in order to service this new loan that they were given by OpenAI that doesn't start until October. And whether or not this actually ends up sinking the company is one thing. It seems very likely, but this is the biggest company in this space that isn't Google or Amazon, that has no other way to insulate their losses like Meta has been for years. It's really bad. And I believe Ed describes it as fucking rancid when looking at the initial public offering documentation that that CoreWeave has presented to the SEC. And the sort of cherry on top of it all that makes it really clear as to why CoreWeave is trying to do this initial public offering is that they are desperate for money. And as part of their documentation, they're claiming that their company is somehow worth $35 billion, even though it's saddled with massive amounts of debt that it has no way of paying off, and that the company admits that they will require an exponential growth in the AI market that, because they don't control the software, they then can't control. They somehow need, in the next 6 months, to have Microsoft's Copilot or Google Gemini or OpenAI's ChatGPT somehow become a core, pivotal part of the work environment that people are using day to day. And without that, and there's been no sign of that happening yet because all of these services kind of suck, their company's already dead in the water.
So I have a question, right? Because like we're very much seeing the writing on the wall at this point.
It feels
These
like
are the guys who provide the hardware for all those other services to run pretty nonchalantly, right?
Yes, to a degree, yes.
So they go down, and I'm sure someone's going to buy them up pretty cheap, all things considered. But like worst case scenario, what happens to the AI market if these fuckers go down?
That is the question. Does the market survive? The scale of this is obviously not nearly the same as the housing crisis in 2008, right?
Yeah.
The things that are collateralized here aren't people's homes that are going to be lost. This is an AI company, so that impact isn't as reaching. But the scale of the money that's tied up in this space is very similar. And it stands to reason that if a company like CoreWeave, who is focused entirely on just servicing the hardware side of the AI space, is unprofitable to the degree that for every where did it go? He had a really good dollar to dollar breakdown of it here, where every time CoreWeave spends $1.43, they only get $1 back. They are constantly losing money, day to day, month to month, all over the year. If CoreWeave can't make this money, just doing the easy part of this, buying the hardware and putting it in a building, how is Google making money by doing this at double the scale? How is Amazon making money by doing it at 50% greater scale? And the answer is that they're not. They just don't have to make the public offerings that show how much money they're losing doing this.
In my opinion, this makes a lot of the Donnie glazing during Project Stargate becoming a thing a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Digestible. It makes it make a lot more sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
It also starts to make the fact that the Trump administration has started to open up the Treasury to explore cryptocurrency as a reserve make a lot more sense.
China's going to buy us. We are going to get bought. Fuck.
So that is the thing that I'm going to be interested to see. I have no doubt that CoreWeave in particular is going to go down at some point this year. I think Ed makes an extremely compelling argument. It goes into a lot more detail than we've gone through here, of course, because it's a very dense subject. Yeah. Talking about like comparing the exact details of these loans and how the money is broken down. And it's important to keep in mind too that this is just these two giant loans that he's talking about. They have other loans too that they have to pay off still. There's also stuff talking about reported contractual problems that CoreWeave has had with Microsoft. Microsoft being one of their largest partners. There's a good example where a few years ago, the largest customer, that CoreWeave had made up about 15% of their business, where today Microsoft is their largest customer and they make up about 62% of their customer business. So having all of their eggs in that basket is extremely dangerous and risky. And it doesn't indicate a healthy customer appetite in the AI space if Microsoft is the only one interested in working with them in that scale.
I mean, has anybody really, though, had a use for AI? Like, truthfully, like, what does
that's
AI
the problem.
provide?
Yeah. These companies are bending over backwards trying to find that, but people don't give a shit. Like we saw this week, there's been a lot of clowning about ChatGPT's image generation thing that they added, where people are making these shitty Ghibli AI generated things.
Yeah.
And it really seems like the extent of the interest that the average person has in integrating AI into their life is in the form of the equivalent of something that's just a shitty image filter.
That's really
that's the tier that they're on, is putting dog ear emojis on a picture and sharing it as part of a trend. And I don't know about you, that doesn't sound fucking profitable to me.
Like, here's the thing. I've kind of changed a little bit of my opinion on AI. Regurgitative, generating AI, fuck that. Mm-hmm. But like, you know, like Now and Then by the Beatles, where they used an AI to kind of recreate John's voice off an original recording because the fidelity was too low.
Sure.
Yeah. If you can use it as a tool, like a machine learning algorithm to like that kind of AI, I'm okay with. Tools, I'm fine with. But like you said, the rest of it is just kind of a shitty filter.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I think is really important. They talk about it as generative AI because that's the buzzword for it, but it's important to remember that all of the current technology ties back to the large language models that have been worked on for over a decade now. Those models are very good at doing one thing, and that's predicting the next thing based on the input that you gave them.
Yeah. It always feels like to me that AI was shoved out the door because it was taking too much time in development, and they were just needing a return on investment.
It's very much the kind of thing where smart, it ties back into cryptocurrency, right? In a lot of ways. You have people who are extremely knowledgeable about one type of one aspect of scientific space, that being cryptographic encryption, right? So they say that because they know that, they must be good about everything. They must be smart about a bunch of other stuff. And they're not. And now we're saying the same thing. We have a bunch of people who are extremely knowledgeable about large language models and how to program them. And they're trying to extrapolate that to being smart about other stuff when the average person doesn't give a shit. They don't want cryptocurrency because they already have a bank and a checking account and it works and they don't need something new. And in the same way, we already have spell check, right? We don't need predictive text generation. The average person doesn't give a shit about spending tokens to burn a tree in the rainforest in order to make a picture. They don't care. Or they don't care enough for it to be at this scale. And that's the crux of this, right? Is that's why it's a bubble. It has ballooned to a scale that doesn't make sense because nobody's using it. I think that it was Google Gemini, Ed was talking about on the podcast I mentioned earlier, has something like 17 million monthly users, something like that. And on the scale of, something that you want to have mass adoption, that's nothing.
Well, even that's then, how many people use Gemini that pay for it? Yeah, exactly.
How many of those are monthly subscriptions? It's a fraction of that still. People don't give a shit.
Yeah.
And the people who do are making their own models for their own companies. They're not buying an off-the-shelf solution because this stuff has become so specialized. And that's where the real concern with CoreWeave comes in, because they should be picking up the slack in that space, where if you're, an automotive company, right, who wants to explore using large language models as a way to assess your product lines to find inefficiencies, you would partner with somebody like CoreWeave in order to run those algorithms that you would use to make those assessments. But they're not. Or at the very least, they're not doing it at a scale that's significant. Not when Microsoft is making up 62% of their customer base in the last year. These companies have ballooned way past the size that they should have on hype and unfulfillable promises, and that balloon is going to pop at some point. And it seems like we're getting close to that date.
So
now, what I'm wondering on, though, is that when CoreWeave pops, how, or if CoreWeave gets to the point where it's about to fail, what do the other companies do to insulate it? Because they are also extremely they're at an extreme risk because of this, right? If CoreWeave goes down, people are going to look at Google, people are going to look at Amazon, people are going to look at Meta and wonder how shit is your product actually financially? And it's complete shit. So what steps are they going to take to hide CoreWeave going down? I think we saw the first step of this already, where Microsoft bought OpenAI, right?
Yeah.
Microsoft is already 62% of CoreWeave's customer base. For a company the size of Microsoft, I wouldn't be surprised if they just buy it. If for no other reason than just to continue to hide how terrible this product is, how unprofitable it is. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Aren't
you glad we're not in tech?
Very, yes.
Yeah.
To close off here, I'm going to abridge a quote from Ed's article. CoreWeave is both a fascinating and disturbing window into the actual money that these companies do or don't make, and the answer is not very much at all.
To me, this is very apparent. You remember the H-1B like visa like scandal Elon was in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is just more evidence to show that they literally need that scandal to go into, like, they need those visas just to live.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Regardless.
Last thing I have to close us out on. We do have a couple of movies to go through very quickly because they're all kind of bad.
Cool.
And we're going to go through them in ascending order of different types of... I don't know. None of them are great, but we'll just go through them real quick. The Woman in the Yard, horror, mystery, and thriller. Daniel Deadweiler stars as Ramona, a woman crippled by grief as she survives a car accident that takes her husband. Seriously injured, Ramona now must care for their 14-year-old son and 6-year-old daughter, alone in her rural farmhouse. Then, one day, the woman takes... Wait, what?
You okay?
Oh, sorry. I think then one day it's supposed to be a woman takes form in their yard. But it's got a typo, so I was really confused as to what it was actually trying to say, because it didn't make sense. Ramona assumes the woman is lost or demented, but as the woman creeps nearer and nearer to the house, it becomes clear she is no ordinary figure, and her intentions are anything but peaceful. Now, Ramona must rally to protect herself and her children from the grasp of the woman who simply won't leave them alone. This one is at a 41% from critics and a 45% from audiences.
I wonder why.
Main criticisms are related to pacing and writing. Good performances, not bad, but not good enough. We also have Death of a Unicorn, starring Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen this everywhere, and I don't know about you, but I see, like, Death of a Unicorn, right?
Yep.
And my little fucking Doctor Who brain turns on. I keep thinking of that Agatha Christie episode, Unicorn and the Wasp of Doctor Who. Yeah. So this has been really fucking confusing for me this week. I think it's dyslexia brain, just trying to fill in words I already associate with unicorn.
See, I can't help but think of Death of a Salesman whenever I see this title.
Ooh, that's gonna fuck with me too. You're right.
I'm sorry for doing that to you, but my brain, like, it's like a record skip when I see Death of a, and the next word is not salesman.
No, I get that. I can see that. I think the thing with me is I see, like, the fucking posters, and there's, like, a monster or something in that movie.
Yeah, I see Cheesy Monster,
and that's where the Doctor Who comes in.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find a bit of a longer one here, because the synopsis here on Rotten Tomatoes is a bit brief. That's still a bit long. Whatever. It's not doing well, so I don't care. A father and daughter accidentally hit and kill a unicorn while en route to a weekend retreat where his billionaire boss seeks to exploit the creature's miraculous curative properties. It's an A24 movie, so I'm kind of surprised that they got Paul Rudd on board for it. 55% from critics, 76% from audiences. A lot of the criticisms that I was seeing from it, skimming through the reviews, are related to the attempts at satire and allegories that it's trying to make just being bad and not funny. This is obviously meant to be sort of comedy-ish, and it just isn't great.
Paul Rudd has been on this very weird, like, post Ant-Man Quantumania, I need to reestablish myself arc. Have you seen that lately?
It has been interesting.
Okay, so Sam and I have been watching Only Murders in the Building.
Yep.
Have you heard of that show?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so for the audience, main premise is there's a murder mystery to solve each season. Season 3 is Paul Rudd. Paul Rudd gets murdered. Not the person, but very much a Paul Rudd analog. And the whole time I'm watching this, it's roughly around the time, like, it's post-Quantumania, Paul Rudd.
Yep.
And, like, there's a plot line where he is a former superhero actor who's trying to make a new career for himself in Broadway to establish he's a real, like, talent. And the whole time I'm watching this, I'm wondering how much of this is, like, Paul Rudd asking the script to just kind of, like, please make me, look, don't let Ant-Man be my legacy. There's even a scene where someone calls him a superhero hack, and it involves Paul Rudd beating the shit out of that character.
Very subtle.
Very, very subtle, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Our last release for this weekend, which I actually think the audience score went up even more since I pulled this up on earlier. A working man, Levin Cade, left behind a decorated military career in the Black Ops to live a simple life working construction. But when his boss's daughter, who is like family to him, is taken by human traffickers, his search to bring her home uncovers a world of corruption far greater than he ever could have imagined.
Taken.
52% from critics, 90% from audiences. Yes,
Taken.
it's taken, but it's not actually his daughter.
It's still fucking taken.
Apparently, this is a brutal one from Katie Walsh, Tribune News Service. In the grand scheme of Statham's filmography, the Shaggy, a working man, ends up at the bottom of the heap.
Yeah, 'cause it's fucking taken.
Yeah, this is an interesting perspective as well. Radion, Samapia, CBC Radio, some of this can come off as reactionary in terms of how it appeals to a certain kind of demographic who are very much rallying around a certain kind of masculinity.
Okay, we're near the end of the show. Cairo,
yes,
you're a man, I'm a man. We are two guys who are very comfortable in our fucking skin, right? To a certain extent. What is masculinity to you? Because I'm getting really fucking sick of this, like, idea of, like, 1980s macho man masculinity.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. It's hard to put a word on it, but it's not the kind of physicality that a lot of these portrayals like it to be.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Like, I think that JD Vance is obviously going through some kind of not gender dysphoria, body dysphoria right now because of all the memes. Well, that's why he's on that public awareness tour you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I think he fucking deserves it for falling into this meme. Because, like, I don't know how to put this. It is too much of a question mark, and the only answer we're getting is absolute bullshit. And I think, like, it is severely damaging a lot of people, because I just found out what a Jack Doherty was, and I don't like Jack Doherty. And it strikes me as the kind of thing that only happens when you have people raised on this bullshit. Do we have anything else?
I don't think so. This is a bit of a slow one for movies, but it's going to be an interesting one next week.
Foreshadow.
I will say, I tried to go on the Rotten Tomatoes page for God, what do they call it? Coming soon to theaters page. And I was confused at first because just skimming through it, I was just like, wait a minute, I don't see the release next week. And it's because the poster for it, is just so bland that it just blends in completely with all of the usual slop that gets thrown up on Rotten Tomatoes so much. It just is nothing. And I am both dreading and looking forward to seeing what the response to it's going to be.
Yeah, I am going to try getting into a theater for that one because it's going to be fun.
Is it? Look, okay. As one of the 5 people who saw Megalopolis in theaters, I now know personally that is not always true.
As someone who watched Venom: The Last Dance in theaters, I think I'm immune to bullshit now. I think it gave me superpowers.
I don't know. I hope that this is a Venom: The Last Dance kind of bad movie, if only for the actors involved. I hope that there's something here for people to have fun with, but it was, seeing how like fundamentally broken Megalopolis has really disillusioned me in like what the floor for how bad a movie that releases in theaters can be now.
I see.
It goes low. So, yeah.
If you all can't figure it out by now, I have very little hope for you. I'm Miss Orion, and I'm excited for next week.
And I am Chiral, and I'm also a Schmo.
God damn, I was going to save that for next week, man. Spoilers for next week.